Hi, I'm Alicia Michelle, and as a trained and certified Christian mindset coach, I've helped hundreds of Christian women discover brain science-based mindset tools to help them grow closer to God and break free from anxiety, perfectionism, people-pleasing, and feeling like they're never enough. The Christian Mindset Coach is the award-winning podcast that shows you how to use simple brain science principles and biblical truth to renew your mind for lasting confidence, joy, and peace. I'm so glad you're here. Grab a cozy spot and let's get started.
Hello, my friend. Welcome to today's episode of the Christian Mindset Coach with me, Alicia Michelle. Today's the day. Today is the day before we launch emotional confidence into the world. And this day has been years in the making. I'm so thankful to be at this place. And I just have so many emotions as I'm sitting here thinking about where we've been, the journey I've been on with God through this whole book process, and what he may be doing with it, and how even just some of the things that he is doing with it. I'm going to share one really, really exciting thing here in a second. But most of all, I'm just grateful. I'm grateful and thankful that God has called me to do this work. And I am praying so many blessings over these books, that whoever gets their hands on these books would not just understand more about themselves and know how to manage emotions, which truly is important, but that the ultimate goal would be they could know our Savior. They could grow in relationship with him through this very everyday way that we all need to learn to trust him. And that is in our reactions, our emotions, and our feelings. That is what I am thinking about today as we open the doors and officially give birth, so to speak, to this book, Managing Emotions. I wanted to share with you an incredible God story that has happened even before this book has come out. I heard a few weeks ago from my publisher that something happened that I was not even aware of. And it just reminded me of how God is behind the scenes doing things in all of our lives that we don't even know about. So it gave me a lot of encouragement and hope. I found out that Target, yes, that Target, if you're in the US, you know what Target is. Target placed an order to put my book in 500 of their stores as part of a New Year's promotion on spirituality. They are planning to put the book on an end cap with other books on spirituality that will be coming out starting December 31st, 500 Target stores where the book will be featured. And now this wasn't even on my radar. Like Target? Target is where these people who are like New York Times bestselling authors 5 times over, those are the kind of books they have there. There's not a lot of space for books at Target. I was like blown away that I would be considered for something like this, and that Target has chosen to say yes, and they're doing this. And what a perfect time of year to have the book featured and on an end cap. Like, are you kidding me? As I was absorbing this news, I was first just like blown away by God, because I didn't even know that this was possible and that he was working on this behind the scenes, but obviously he was. But more than anything, it made me excited because I started thinking about my heart truly is, like I just had shared, for people to know themselves, but also to understand and know their creator as part of reading this book. And I have a heart for people who are maybe on the fringes of faith, or who didn't grow up in church, or maybe did grow up in church and are kind of like deconstructing their faith. But there's a lot of people who are just kind of maybe wouldn't go in the doors of a church. They wouldn't go, but they are curious about a relationship with Christ, or about God. And this is the kind of thing that maybe some mom who has had a rough day with her kids is just having a Target moment, with her coffee, walking around trying to decompress. And she runs into this book and she has an opportunity to meet Jesus. Like, I am praying that these books and these 500 stores would be that kind of an encounter with Christ for each person. So will you join with me in praying for these kind of divine moments for all of the books that will be out there in different ways? It's going to be in Barnes & Noble. It's going to be in other Christian booksellers. It's going to be at my publisher itself, Baker Bookhouse. You can find that online. This whole book thing is just crazy. It's kind of like podcasting, because every week I create these episodes and I put them out there, and I never know who's listening or how it's impacting people. God is using this podcast all over the globe. We have listeners from literally every country in the world, which just is insane to me how that could be possible. But it's the same thing with this book, is that he's sharing these and they're going out. And so my prayer, and I pray that you would join with me, especially in these books that are going into places like Target, the secular bookseller, that it would just change lives for the gospel, that it would change lives. That's the cool thing I wanted to share. Now, if you are interested in getting a copy of the book, it's available starting November 12th. It'll be available on Amazon, wherever books are sold, Barnes and Noble, Christian bookstores. The thing with Target is, again, it won't be available until December 31st in their stores. So it's not going to be readily available tomorrow at Target. Don't run out to Target and look for it. And it's only going to be available in 500 of their stores, 500 of their 2,000 stores in the US, which is still a big number. But we don't specifically know which stores those will be, except that they're in the Sun Belt states. So we'll talk about that more as it gets closer. But go to those other places and you can get your copy now online or wherever books are sold. And then once you've read it, if you would leave a review, this is one of the best things that you can do for a book, is to order it or pre-order it and then leave a review. That just tells, again, the algorithm, it lets other people know that they're checking it out. Like, hey, this person thought this, and leave an honest review. I'm totally cool with that. Like whatever you feel is the right answer. I'm never going to tell you like, oh, give it 5 stars. If it deserves it, great. If not, then, you share what your experience has been with this book. So just once you've read it, if you would leave a review, and then again, please pray that this book would have a massive impact on every single person that it comes in contact with. Let's bring this whole conversation on managing emotions that we've been doing in this podcast series. Let's bring it full circle by asking this very important question. How will managing emotions change your life? Why does it matter? Why does it matter? Well, I can give you some general statistics and general information, but it's important for you to figure out that question for yourself. I am going to share a little bit about my story, about how it's changed me to be able to have these skills to manage emotions. And I'm going to give you a chance to ask that question of yourself as we get closer to the end of the episode. And if you want to learn more about specifically how managing emotions or lack of managing emotions affects our society, we talked a lot about this in episode 271 when we first introduced the concept behind the book and why I'm so passionate about helping women and men find freedom in this area. I'm going to just give kind of 4 broad strokes to that. We cover it more in 271 and also in the book, but the big 4 reasons how unprocessed emotions affects us is, first, of course, it affects our relationships. We know this. It affects our self-esteem and our ability to connect with God. It has been contributing to the loneliness epidemic. This is something that is huge in our country right now, at least in the US, and I would guess in Western culture in general, that we are lonelier than we've ever been, even though we are technically more connected than we've ever been with technology. We're more lonely than we've ever been. And unprocessed emotions, when we leave them out there to just kind of fester, especially, it builds walls between us and God. I talk about this concept as being a crack in our foundation with our trust in the Lord. Dig more into episode 271 or get the book and learn more about some of this stuff if you are more interested in the details behind some of those. But that's kind of the broad strokes. So let me share with you my story of how doing this work changed my life. First, learning how to process my emotions, it radically changed my physical health. In the book, I shared my story of what happened to me back in 2017 when my entire world came crashing down and I had this massive medical crisis that was brought on by not taking care of myself. And that not taking care of myself started with not being able to process my emotions or just ignoring them or pushing them down. It had created all these mixed messages and toxic soundtracks in my head that were keeping me stuck in patterns that I was not doing well. I, on the outside, was managing so many things: homeschooling, taking care of 4 kids, having a husband who traveled 50% of the time for work. During the time of when the incident actually happened, my husband was out of work and he'd been out of work for 18 months. It was hard. I mean, I'm not going to lie, but just keeping up with the pace of all of those things, it kept me being completely depleted day after day, a little at a time. I was not able to sleep. I literally probably like the 15 years before we had that incident, I was sleeping about 4 hours a night. I would go to bed at 12:30 and wake up at 4:30. That was just my schedule, and toward the end there, I couldn't even get to sleep at 12:30. I was just so wired all the time, and not that I was on caffeine, like, I really don't drink coffee. If I have any coffee, it'll be decaf. I don't eat a lot of sugar. There was such a drive in me. So after this whole crisis happened, I was on my back for 9 months. I had 2 vertebral artery dissections and I had several mini strokes as a result, which kept me on high doses of blood thinners and forced me to lay on my back for 9 months and let go of everything in my life, including homeschooling, taking care of my family, being able to cook for my family and take care of my kids. It was very, very hard. I had to say goodbye to all the stuff I was doing online. I just had to lay everything down and really come to terms with why I was in that place. God challenged me about, how did you get here? What was driving you to think that you had to keep up this pace? And as I dug into that more, I noticed those patterns and I saw all of the emotions that were behind it. So as I began changing my life and addressing some of these emotions and learning very practical skills from the Lord and even developing concepts like ADD, it began to heal me physically. Obviously, I was doing things like just spending so much time sleeping and changing my physical lifestyle. But as I was changing my emotions and dealing with them, it was healing me physically. And I know now that when I am in a high level of stress, I definitely make it a point to check in with myself emotionally, to be honest about what I'm feeling, and to do what I need to do to protect myself because I never want to go back, never want to go back to what happened in 2017. And in fact, God told me when I was in that hospital room that He was giving me a second chance at my life, that I was going to get through all of the strokes and the crazy things that were happening, but that there would not be a third chance. So that I needed to figure out what was going on. And I needed, once I saw that information, I needed every day to make a different decision on how to live. That echoes into my mind now. And I'm grateful that God gives me kind of a warning sign in my head where I get a headache or I feel things in my body where I know I'm pushing too hard. I need to stop and I need to really address the emotions behind why I'm doing what I'm doing or notice if I'm in certain patterns. And God helps me. I don't ever want to go back to that place. And I pray you never have the physical effects of what can happen when we push things down for so long. So I just want to say that that's a huge reason. And that's a big part of how doing this work has changed my life. Managing my emotions has also dramatically changed my relationships. And I think the biggest thing was that as I began to not stuff things anymore, it became evident like, okay, well, if I don't stuff them, what am I supposed to do with them? So I started to learn and really come to terms with a lot of the things in my life that I had no emotional responsibility for, and the things I did have emotional responsibility for. So I learned to see what's mine to own and to release what wasn't mine to own. That's really, really hard work if you've ever done that work, but it's really meaningful work because there's freedom in seeing what I'm in charge of, what I can change. And there's freedom in saying, I can completely release that. That's God's or that's the other person's. We talk more about emotional responsibility in episode 283. I'm not going to go into it a little any more than that, but just having that in my head gave me the freedom to express what I felt God wanted me to express in relationships and to let go of those things that weren't mine to say or weren't mine to change, or maybe I learned how to address them with the Lord versus addressing them to that other person. So it did. It changed my relationships, my marriage specifically, but also changed my parenting. I think as our kids get older, and if you're a mom of kids who have kind of gone through that toddler phase and elementary phase, and now they're in the teen phase or the young adult phase, which is my kids are more in the teen and young adult phase, there is a lot of stuff a lot of emotions that can be incredibly taxing for her parent in that stage. And learning to take emotional responsibility for what was mine and what wasn't mine, it changed my ability to show up for them, my kids, in a healthier way. So it has definitely changed my relationships to do this work of managing emotions. Now, the other ways it has changed my life is that it has changed kind of my everyday attitude. I mean, I give myself a lot more space to feel what I'm feeling. I don't try to fix it and make myself perfect and like, I have to feel this way every day. I have to be joyful. I have to be peaceful, or there's something wrong with me. I definitely see what's there. And using tools like ADD, I can acknowledge it without judging myself for it. I can move through it. I can trust God with it and know that it's not going to last forever if I'm having a down day. And that's okay. And that gives me the ability to push through or to keep going on days when maybe I just don't really feel all of the fruits of the spirit, because we're not going to feel a feeling all the time. It gives me a new attitude to approach everything that I have every day. It gives me, because I'm continually clearing out these emotions and working through them before the Lord, I feel like I don't have a lot of baggage that I'm bringing in from one day to the next, if that makes sense. And then kind of in that same line, it's changed my ability to endure difficult seasons when we do go through those times of layoffs or intense issues with what our kids are walking through, or even natural disasters like hurricanes and storms. I mean, obviously, all kinds of stuff happen in life. It's given me the ability to work through those feelings, not judging them, and to endure, to persevere through them, because I'm not running from what's there and what I'm feeling or not trying to change it. I'm stepping into it and in a healthy way, leaning into it with the Lord. And it's actually growing my faith. It's strengthening my faith, which kind of leads to the last way of how it's changed my life. And that is, it's changed my relationship with God. One of the biggest things that people say is they want to see God in the everyday. They want to see him at work, right? I would argue that working through our emotions and leaning into our feelings when we're feeling them and asking God to help us is a fantastic way for us to see God in the everyday. And I've definitely seen that to be true. God partners with us. As we talked about in the ADD process, in the acknowledge step, he wants to show us his compassion for what we're feeling. In the discern step, he wants to give us his clarity for what's right and what's wrong and how to sort through what we're feeling in line with scripture. And in that third step, the second D of decide, he gives us his courage to make the right choice, to move through, to release things. He gives us all of those steps. Those are just those three ways: compassion, clarity, and courage. Even as we work through something like ADD, those are ways that God shows up. We see our living God in our everyday lives when we can give our emotions to him in these simple yet powerful ways. That's my story. And I want to share a couple of testimonies from the book of how managing emotions has changed other women's lives. These are coaching clients, or they may be clients from the Mindset Makeover, but women who have used tools like ADD, some of them specifically in these quotes reference ADD, but just how it's made a difference for them to make this a priority in these very small but mighty ways throughout a day. And these are, again, we're all just everyday women. There's nothing special about any of these people, including myself. I'm just sharing these things to let you know that if you feel like this is overwhelming to even think about managing your emotions, I want you to see the benefits of it. I want you to know the hope, the freedom, the joy, and the peace that's on the other side of it. This first testimonial is from Rebecca, and she was one of my coaching clients. She said, I looked back at a journal from a year ago, and it was really encouraging to see how my thoughts and feelings have evolved after using ADD. I used to be a slave to my emotions, especially my anger. My inner voice was so accusatory and self-hating. Now I'm much more able to separate myself from my emotions and release control to God. I'm way more compassionate to myself and to others now. It's really encouraging to see how my inner dialogue has changed and my relationship with God has grown. A huge weight has finally lifted from my shoulders, one that has been there for 10 to 15 years. So if you have felt that weight, or even you just feel like, I've been running from this idea in my life for a long time. I don't want to open that closet door and see all the stuff that's there that I don't want to deal with. I understand. It is intimidating, to say the least, to want to begin to look at managing emotions. I'm not going to lie to you about that. And yet, I want you to hear stories like this of how what you are feeling, that intimidation maybe in looking at your emotions, it's a weight. It's causing damage, whether it may be physical damage in your body or it may be affecting your relationships. It's causing something that is keeping you from being your best and from living your fullest self. I mean, that's just the reality. And I think that we have to understand that. We have to understand that there's freedom on the other side. I loved too how she said that she's way more compassionate to herself and to others. That is so true. When we begin to manage our emotions, I didn't mention this, but that's something that's definitely happened for me too. I have so much more compassion for people now when they're having an off day, or my kids when they're feeling whatever. I'm just thinking about some different things my kids are going through right now. And just, I feel with them and I understand them. Where maybe before I would have been like, okay, sure, yeah, but let's move on, like trying to push them on to just believing truth. And there is something very beautiful about empathizing with someone else's pain and seeing it. It just makes us better people. It makes us better humans. It makes us stronger witnesses for the gospel. Let's share another testimonial here. This one is from Stephanie. She also is a coaching client. And she said, before using the ADD tool, I didn't sit with my emotions at all. I wanted them to be fixed or solved, and I couldn't let the healing work at its own speed. Acknowledging my emotions with God beside me has taught me how to actively rest in his care and provision. Now I'm much more patient with the process of managing emotions. It's also much easier to hold the hard emotions with open hands instead of closed fists. Here's why I wanted to share this testimonial, because a lot of us, and I think this is definitely true for those of us in the church, we just want emotions to kind of go away. We want them to be fixed. We were just like, can't I just have my mind completely in line with scriptural truth and then I won't have any problems, right? And it's those darn pesky emotions that keep us from that. Well, God gave us emotions. He gave us emotions as a way to interact with this world. And emotions aren't all bad. Some of the greatest feelings and experiences that we have are because we have emotions, connections with other people, ways to explore this world. All comes back to the ability to not just have this linear thinking mind, but to be able to respond to this world. I love that she said that she's now become more patient with this process and to be able to hold those hard emotions with open hands, because that is so true. When we hold our emotions with open hands, we're letting God come in and we're letting him work with us to show us other things that might be behind them or things we haven't thought of. It's like she said, it teaches us how to actively rest in his care and provision. Another thing, of course, that people are always looking for, how can I see God at work? How can I see him providing for me? This is a powerful way to see him at work in your life, a way to actively rest in the Lord. Now, one more testimonial I want to share here, and that is from Bryn. She was part of the Christian Mindset Makeover, and she's also been a coaching client. She says, ADD is so much more helpful than just telling ourselves to stop thinking something. Before I had ADD, I would wonder, how do I make myself just believe God's truth in an emotional moment, like so many people advise when my feelings are also so real? I understand that we're supposed to take any thoughts captive that don't align with God's thoughts, but if we don't deal with the feelings directly, then we're just stuffing them. I've used other tools to try to calm my feelings, but ADD gives me a proactive response to an emotion. It's so helpful for me to know what to do with the thought. I'm someone who needs structure, and ADD gives me a specific way to manage my emotions that really works. So if you're someone like that who needs structure, then this is a great tool for you. This is actually part of the reason why I formulated the ADD model, was because I wanted structure. I wanted to not just have that, we'll just give it to God kind of thing. I mean, I'm like, that would frustrate me. Like, how can I just give it to God? What does that look like? How can I just believe God's truth when I'm feeling all of these things? And especially as someone who is a highly sensitive person. I'm going to have to do an episode on HSPs or highly sensitive people in the future because if you are one of these people, you understand that it's very real in the moment. You feel it, you know it. And it's as much a part of you as your desire to want to be in alignment with the truth. Yet, how are we supposed to reconcile those if we're just supposed to give it to God? So this process, and especially combining ADD with emotional prep, it is very powerful because we know exactly what to do with a thought. That is my heart's desire, is that people will be less afraid to manage emotions because they will have a specific tool to be able to know what to do on how to release it to the Lord in ways that is backed by scripture and science together. The real question behind all of this, honestly, isn't about these stories. It's not about my story. It's not about these other people's stories. It's about how can learning to better manage emotions change your life? One of the first things that I have women do inside of the Emotional Confidence Club, which is a group of women who are working to implement a lot of the concepts we talk about in emotional confidence in like a lab format with a community of people who are supporting them with a roadmap of how to use the tools that we talk about in the book. They are living out the concepts of emotional confidence. Emotional confidence, inside this Emotional Confidence Club, before we even have them dig into the materials, I ask them to come up with a why statement for managing their emotions. There's a format, there's a worksheet that we go through, and I have them post it in the group because I think it's really important that they go through and see why they're doing this, what will happen if they don't do it, and what they're committing to. And then to do that in a public way to say, this is me, this is what I'm committing to, and this is why. And it's interesting because when that happens, all of the other people who have also shared, you find that, hey, that's exactly how I was too. I mean, you see the similarities and you see this camaraderie build because people are like, I want to support you in that because I've been there and I feel the exact same way. It's really beautiful. And it also is incredibly empowering them because it helps them to make changes and to keep working through emotions. There's going to be these times when we bring these things up and we're like, I don't want to do this anymore. I mean, I want to go back to the way it was. But honestly, the hardest work of managing emotions comes in the beginning when we first get started because we don't know these tools yet. We haven't practiced them. We don't know what's working. It's like creating a new habit. We're going to go right back to the habits that we're used to. And there's always that work in setting up the habit and getting it going. So if you can kind of push through some of this stuff in the beginning and even work these things out, it is incredibly powerful to learn that, there's hope on the other side and you can use that why to kind of motivate you through those seasons. I want to share one last testimonial that relates to this why statement. And this is from Brianna. She is another coaching client. And she said, I used to be depressed all the time and I felt very hopeless. I saw people around me being happy, and I didn't understand how to get there. I finally got tired of living like that. I wanted something more, and that gave me the tiniest bit of courage to grow in understanding my feelings. These little decisions to lean into my emotions became little bright spots of hope and happiness as I saw my fog lifting. I realized that I didn't ever want to go back to that place. And that's my greatest motivation to stay emotionally connected with myself and others. Do you feel like that? Do you see people around you or hear about people around you and you're like, why don't I feel that freedom? Or why am I continually running from what's inside? If you are tired of living like that, because you have to be tired enough, you do, friend, you have to be tired enough to keep living like that. You have to choose to say, I'm willing to try something new. And that starts with being frustrated enough with how you currently manage emotions. If we want lasting change in any situation, we have to be more uncomfortable staying where we are than we are with that discomfort of moving forward. Animals and even single-celled organisms, they're biologically wired to move towards pleasure and away from pain. And that's ultimately true of human behavior as well. To make change, we have to understand the pain that we're moving from, right? We got to know that. That's the why part. And we got to understand the pleasure we're moving towards. That's what I encourage you to ask yourself now, getting a clear sense of your current situation. What is the pain that you're in now that you want to be free of when it comes to managing emotions? And what could be in the future? What could be? We have a great exercise inside of emotional confidence, one of the downloads. It's called How Are Out of Control Emotions Affecting Your Life? It's one of the first downloads in the book. I think it's after chapter 1. And these are another great way to kind of dig into the material in the book, all these book downloads. We have so many in this book. And that was important to me writing this because I wanted to make sure that people were digging deeper into the material, not just reading it, but how can you interact with this and make it real in your life? But that specific exercise, how are out of control emotions affecting your life? It is incredibly powerful if you're at this place where you're like, I feel like I should, but I don't really know. Like, how will I be different? Or how is it affecting me now? So if to get that, again, you have to order Emotional Confidence or get a copy of Emotional Confidence. And then you'll see at the end of the chapter, there are all kinds of specific links to download those resources. So you'll find that at the end of the chapters. Ultimately, the question that you need to consider right now is, how is not managing your emotions stealing from you? Last week, during a sermon, our pastor shared about the concept of FOMO, something we're very familiar with, something that I'm personally struggling with as a kind of an ongoing thing in my life. I can tell you some funny stories about how, I've gone on vacations and I'm like, I want to do this, but I also want to do this. And I've had to have other people be like, okay, what's the reality with our time? I know you want to experience everything, but what is the reality with our time? So it's something that I struggle with. So when he was talking about FOMO, I was like instant attention, right? Because I get that concept. But he turned the concept of FOMO on its head when he said, what about the FOMO that we need to have as believers for things of the Lord? FOMO for joy, for peace, for patience, all the fruits of the Spirit. We need to have a desire for that. Like, what is happening in my life that's stealing from me being able to access those things more? Those things are there. Man, I want to have those things. What are we doing or allowing to happen that keeps us from this? And how often are our emotions doing exactly that? So think about, what if you were to have FOMO for this ability to understand yourself in this way, to be able to have the calm and the peace to work through a situation? Doesn't mean that you're always going to have one joy cloud to the next, but just to be able to have that confidence of when the hard times come or the difficult emotions come up, you have this FOMO to want to lean into and really get the most out of how God can help you through it and how he can help you tap into the peace that passes all understanding, and how he can help you keep your thoughts focused on him, like it says in Isaiah, all these verses that we read about and we hear about. And that is what managing our emotions can help us discover. So just kind of as a final call to action here, I encourage you to grab your copy of Emotional Confidence, 3 Simple Steps to Manage Emotions with Science and Scripture, wherever books are sold. And next week, we have a really fun episode. We did a book launch party a few days before the book's release. And so we recorded an episode at the book launch party. I can't wait to share that with you next week. I'll see you then.
Thanks for joining me today for the Christian Mindset Coach. If you loved today's show, would you take 2 seconds and share a 5-star rating and review on Apple Podcasts? I've got a special gift for you when you share a review, my amazing 50 I Am declarations, 50 statements and Bible verses about who you are in Christ. This is an audio meditation and a written statement that is extremely popular with my clients, and I want to give you access just for sharing your Apple Podcast review. Simply screenshot your review and send it to hello@vibrantchristianliving.com, and we'll send you the link to access the 50 I Am Declarations resource. Thanks so much for sharing your rating and review so that we can get the word out about the podcast. See you back here next week.